Item number 11.
Item 11, update on the Railyard alternatives and I-280 Boulevard feasibility study. This is an information item.
Okay, I will recognize Director John Ram from the Planning Department.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Ram with the Planning Department. Pleased to present to you today the results of the first phase of a multi-phase study to look at major transportation systems in the southeast quadrant of the city, specifically around the Railyard and I-280 Boulevard corridor. This has a very clunky name. I think I would prefer to call it the Southeast Quadrant Transportation Study or something of that nature, but it is the name that we have chosen, so it's affectionately called the RAB. I want to start by thanking Director Chang and the staff of the TA and the staff of the MTA for their work with us on this. This is an important, multifaceted study that really is looking at multiple transportation systems that are converging on one corner of the city, and taking a fresh look at these and seeing how we might get the best bang for our buck in the long run on this very important part of the city. I'll just quickly go through these slides, talk about the reasons for the study, and then go through the components very quickly. We've been asked many times, why are we doing this now? There are some projects that are in place and are moving forward. There is something on the order of $6 to $7 billion of investment that are proposed for this small corner of the city between this component of high-speed rail north of 16th Street, between the Caltrain electrification and the development of the DTX. We think it's appropriate to take a fresh look at these systems to see how they come together collectively to end up with the best results for the city. As you know, the recent announcement by High-Speed Rail, California High-Speed Rail, is that they have somewhat shifted their thinking in their business plan, and they are now proposing that the high-speed train should come north first rather than south. So the plan is to get to San Francisco by 2025. It's less than a decade away. We think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that that alignment and that system can best serve the city in the future. We are concerned about some of the current thinking in their proposal, very specifically about some of the crossings. High-speed rail is proposing, rather than depressing the train, is proposing to depress the city streets under the train tracks and leave the train at grade. This creates situations, as you see here, where the streets would be essentially like highway underpasses, if you will, in this part of the city. We do not think this is an appropriate way of reconnecting the city. In fact, we think it will do damage and further separate the waterfront from the city, further separate Mission Bay from the city, and so on. And so we are very concerned. The lower image here is actually a current image of in Oakland, where a very similar situation exists today, and I don't think any of us would like to see that happen in this part of the city in the future. So it's one of the many issues that we're concerned about in the current thinking of high-speed rail and the Caltrain system. So there are a lot of existing projects and opportunities here that we want to address in this study. And I want to say that the city's position, and of course the voters' position, has been for many years that high-speed rail should come to the Trans-Bay Transit Terminal. We strongly believe in that. We strongly believe that we're trying to get it there as fast as we can and most economic way that we can, which is part of the reason for doing this study. There are a number of standalone projects, of course, that are out there. We want to make sure that we're coordinating efforts with TJPA, with Caltrain, with Caltrans, with all of the various entities involved. We want to look at benefits and costs of this whole system, and we want to try to better knit this part of the city together in the process. So our goals are to understand holistically the projects that are in front of us and to shape the future of this part of the city in the best way that we can. So the study has 5 components. The first is to look at the actual extension of the downtown rail, as we call it, the DTX, that would connect from roughly 16th Street to the Trans-Bay Transit Terminal. The second is to look at the potential for a loop, looping back from the terminal to the system. The third is to look at the actual Caltrain Railyard to see if there are potential opportunities there for either reconfiguration, relocation, and reuse of that site. The fourth is to look at 280 itself to see if it makes sense to remove a portion of 280 to end up with a better transportation system as in the end. And then the fifth is to look at the broad range of public benefit that might result from that, whether it's affordable housing, park space, development to help pay for the system as we did with the Transit Center District, and to look at the land use implications of all of this work. So the study area is roughly below from Market Street down to about 22nd Street. This is the core of the area that we're looking at, and all of these components in some form lie within this area, and I'll go through each component very quickly. So the first component is looking at the alignment for the DTX. This is the current alignment where it runs along 4th Street, turns up 2nd, and into the Transit Center terminal. This alignment would require a cut-and-cover tunnel as it's currently proposed. About 7 years of construction. Current cost estimates are about $4 billion. This is the baseline for what we're looking at in our study. So we are looking at 3 additional alternatives. One is a tunnel that would simply tunnel exactly under the existing alignment. One that would slightly shift the alignment under Pennsylvania Avenue. And the third, which is an entirely different alignment, which would go under 3rd Street through Mission Bay and into the terminal in that direction, connect to 2nd Street and then into the terminal. So just briefly, this is the baseline condition again. This is the existing alignment, which would be a cut-and-cover tunnel. I do want to acknowledge that one of the concerns we've heard from the public is this is an environmentally cleared project. Why are you fooling around with it? We believe that because of the cost increases, because of new technologies with boring machines, because of the land use implications, it's time to take a fresh look at this to see if there is a more efficient way to do this. This is the existing alignment. Essentially the same line on the map, but underground would be an alignment that would tunnel under that existing alignment, underneath and through the columns of Interstate 280, and connect entirely underground, and therefore avoid the problem that I identified earlier of the streets going under the train. Instead, the train would go under the streets. The third alignment is a slight shift to the west under Pennsylvania Avenue, which also could be done in a way to avoid one of the 2 existing rail tunnels, which are problematic, are very old, routinely flood, and this alignment would allow us the option of avoiding at least one of those 2 tunnels by slightly shifting the alignment away from 4th and Townsend. And finally, there's this alignment under 3rd Street, which would veer off. It could veer off at any number of points before or after the existing tunnels under 3rd Street, essentially right next to AT&T Park, under AT&T Park, and into 2nd, according to the existing alignment. This alignment it's about the same distance because of the S-curve in the existing alignment, but has the advantage of being a somewhat straighter shot. So that's, in summary, those are the alignments we're looking at. The one that we are taking out of consideration is the one that would tunnel under the existing alignment, primarily because we don't believe we can actually thread this tunnel between the columns of Interstate 280. It's just not physically feasible. The tolerances are much too narrow. We don't believe that alignment would actually work. So we are carrying forward into the next phase of the study the notion of baseline condition, which is the existing alignment, the Pennsylvania Street alignment, and the 3rd Street alignment. Secondly, we looked at 4 alternatives for essentially looping the train back, if you will, to create a more efficient system that way. We looked at four potential locations for that. You can see the 4 on the map. Each of them have different turning radii, one under Main, one under Spear, one under Stewart, and one in the bay itself, which I know seems a little outlandish, but we felt it was at least worth looking at in this scenario, in this phase of the process. When we looked at these very carefully, excuse me, I'll go back a second. The 2 that don't seem very workable are the 2 numbers 1 and 2, namely Main and Spear Street, because of the turning radii required. High-speed rail trains require a much broader turning radius than conventional trains, and so we are not able to make those 2 components work. So we would like to carry the other 2 components through into the next phase of the study to understand the implications and the costs of those. Thirdly, we looked at the configuration of the rail yard itself. It's about 22 acres of land in the heart of the city. We believe that it's important to look at this land, look at the possible relocation or reconfiguration of this land. Caltrain itself actually looked at the possibility of reducing the size of the rail yard and creating development on its perimeter. We looked at this. We're continuing to work with them on that, and we will continue that into the next phase as well. Obviously, it's an important asset in the middle of the city. It's important, however, to also make sure that we can store trains, and we believe we're looking at possible locations for rail storage elsewhere in the city and outside of the city as well. And finally, the 280, as I mentioned, for about 1.2 miles at the very end of 280, there are only 2 places where one can cross that highway today on city streets. We believe it's important to look at this in the context of a much larger transportation system to understand the possible costs and benefits of removing this piece of the highway or not. And it would only go forward, we think, if it actually makes sense in the terms of the transportation system. And you can see here the potential street connections that could be made in the future if we were to do that. Obviously, San Francisco has a heritage already of removing 2 segments of freeways to great effect. That doesn't mean we should automatically do this. There's obviously costs and implications of this, and we want to make sure if it were to happen, again, it would create the better transportation system and long-term public benefits. So just in summary here, we're looking at 3 of the 4 alignment options on the actual rail line. We're looking at a potential 2 options for the transit center loop. We will continue the Railyard relocation study, as well as looking at the notion of a boulevard in place of 280. And then the 5th component of the study is looking at what are the land use implications and the public benefit implications of these reconfigurations if and when they were to happen. Lastly, I just wanted to tell you that we have completed phase 1 of this study, which is to look at these options. We are entering phase 2. We will be soon establishing a citizens working group. We are assembling those names. We would certainly welcome any nominations any of you have for such a group. And we expect this phase of the study to take approximately 9 to 12 months when we look at each of these alternatives in much more detail, including cost implications. And we do anticipate further public meetings. We had 2 very large public meetings in the last few weeks. I think we had in excess of 150 people attending each meeting. There is a lot of interest in this project, and we do anticipate that to continue as we move forward. And I believe that concludes my presentation, and I'm here with Susan Gigi, the project manager, to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ram. Commissioner Peskin.
Thank you, Chair Wiener. If I may, through the Chair to Director Ram, I just had a number of questions. First, really as a function of governance, as DTX moves forward, is there any discussion between the various agencies, Caltrain, this body, the city by and through, the Planning Department or other agencies, the SFCTA, as to who will ultimately lead the DTX project?
Lead the actual design and construction of it?
Correct.
That has certainly been on the table. We are, as currently constructed, TJPA is responsible for financing and building and maintaining the DTX. There have been issues raised about whether that's correct or not, but I think it's certainly part of the mix of the discussion that's happening.
And then relative to, can you clarify whether the I-280 teardown is necessary for the DTX extension, or are those unrelated issues?
It actually is likely not, depending on the alignment. It depends on the alignment. But given the enormous public investment of something on the order of $6, $7, $8 billion of work, not including the terminal itself, we thought it was appropriate to look at it in light of whether it creates a better transportation system as a whole in this part of the city.
And then relative to the street connections, which I think we all agree are important, are those constrained by I-280 or
They
rail?
currently are. Right, there's only 2, within that 1.2 mile stretch, there are only 2 places to cross the freeway.
But isn't that a function of the rail alignment, not the I-280 alignment?
Perhaps. I mean, I'd have to look at the exact column placement, but that could be the case, yeah.
Yeah,
And topography.
I think that you could make those connections and keep I-280 if you got rid of rail through that area.
Could be.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cohen.
Thank you. Director Ram, I'm not sure if you're the best person to answer this question, but I am going to pose it since we're talking about item 11. I wanted to know if there's been any outreach done to the Bayview community other than I know outreach has been conducted and there's been meetings held with the boosters, but I'm just thinking further south, Viz Valley, Bayview, has there been any meetings or outreach done?
We've had a couple of large public meetings in the Potrero Hill area. I don't know that we've done specific outreach to Bayview, but Susan can maybe answer that.
Yeah, so we've actually gone out to some of the CACs in the area and presented to them, and if there are any out there that would like me to come and present, I'm absolutely willing to do that.
Did you go to the Bayview CAC?
You know what? I contacted them, and I don't believe that I ever made it on to their... I have not presented to the Bayview CAC, no.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We need to do that. Thanks.
Okay, colleagues, any additional questions or comments? Commissioner Peskin.
Thank you, Chair Wiener. I just submit to all of us, both in our capacity as commissioners at the Transportation Authority as well as county supervisors, that this is probably the bodies, we are the bodies that should be discussing who and what agency should be in charge of bringing DTX to the Trans-Bay Terminal. Obviously, there have been some major changes at the TJPA. I, for one, would like to suggest that perhaps when the Trans-Bay Terminal is finished, that the TJPA's lifespan perhaps should be coming to an end in virtually every function except for perhaps the maintenance of the Trans-Bay Terminal. And I think we should be discussing between the executive branch and the Joint Powers Board and this body and the city agencies and the Transportation Authority how we are going to make DTX a reality and what agency is going to be in charge of that moving forward. Obviously, since the passage of Proposition H, the entire underpinning of building the Trans-Bay Terminal was to get downtown Caltrain extension and hopefully someday high-speed rail. Otherwise, we will have built the most expensive bus terminal in the history of humankind.
I will associate myself with Commissioner Peskin's remarks. I think once Phase 1 is complete, once the terminal is complete, we need to have a very, very serious discussion, actually not then, but now, about the project delivery of Phase 2. Downtown extension is not optional. It is absolutely essential, and we have to make it happen, and we will make it happen. And it needs to be a collaboration within the city, but also regionally. This is a regional and, frankly, project of statewide importance. And in terms of delivery, whether it's within the city, whether it's delivered by the High-Speed Rail Authority, we just need to make sure that we have a strong plan in place for how that project is going to be delivered and delivered well. So I agree.
And colleagues, I just also like to express to Director Ram my concern that tying I-280 to the downtown extension alignment, given its controversy, I worry is going to further delay the DTX. While I certainly understand that the different alignments being discussed are interesting, whether it's 3rd Street, Pennsylvania Avenue, or the existing alignment, I'm frankly concerned the longer we have this conversation, the longer we're going to delay DTX and not fulfill the mandate of Proposition H. But I'm also particularly concerned that to the extent that the I-280 teardown and the state's $600 million investment therein is connected to the DTX, that we're going to experience years and years of controversy and delay. So I, for one, would respectfully suggest that those two things not be tethered together, for I think the I-280 teardown is pie in the sky.
Thank you, Commissioner Peskin. I will just add the following. In terms of the I-280 teardown, I want to make sure that we are basing these kinds of decisions about DTX alignment, et cetera, on full analysis. I know there have been some people who have just outside of this chamber or actually some inside this chamber, who have announced their categorical opposition to tearing down the I-280 before the studies have even been complete. And I think this is one of those decisions in terms of what the alignment is going to be for DTX that we as a city, region, and state are going to live with for the next, 100, 150, 200 years. And to me, I don't know what the right answer is in terms of alignment, but I do know that we should make sure that we get it right. And if that means a little bit extra time to make sure we're getting it right, even if it means that we end up sticking with the original alignment, I, for one, favor making a decision based on full information. The other thing I will say, I know there's a lot of controversy around the I-280 teardown, and I know there are pros and cons to doing it. What I will say is some of the arguments we're hearing are the same arguments we heard against taking down the Embarcadero Freeway and the same arguments we heard against taking down the Central Freeway. And I think there are very few people today who would say that it was a mistake to take down either of those freeways. So I just want to make sure that we're basing these decisions on good analysis and that we are making an informed choice about alignment and not dismissing a particular alignment because there are political difficulties surrounding it. Again, this is a, I don't know, 100, 200-year decision that we're making. Director Ram, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I completely agree that it appears as if it can sidetrack this whole study. I do think, though, that given the scale of investment in this part of town, we thought it was worth at least taking it to the next level of analysis. It's all it is. It's a study, and I grant you that there is serious controversy over this, and I'm concerned about that as well. The other thing, if I may, that I just neglected to mention is another advantage of taking a fresh look at these systems is looking at the best alignment that might create the future connection to the East Bay. I think we all agree that the East Bay connection, the TA has been very vocal on this, that a second Trans-Bay crossing is in our future, and we want to make sure that whatever happens with this alignment can best set itself up to make that connection in the future. So that's part of this analysis as well.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate how important that last comment was. This is all about regional rail. Thank you very much, everyone. Colleagues, are there any additional questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Is there any public comment on item number 11? Seeing none, public comment is closed, and this is an information item.